Grants Pass to Eugene. To Eugene to Portland, from Portland to Salem. We're glad you're here. Thank you for joining us today. This segment of the Ropen Radio Network would like to give a shout out to the good people of 911 Supply, located in Kaiser, Oregon. They have everything from hats, jackets, gloves, pants from the 511 gear. I got their clothing, their jacket, their pants, and I took them to Arkansas. It kept me warm the entire time when I was out doing my expedition. So the next time you're out looking for your monster, make sure you have the right gear that gets the job done. 911 Supply for all your tactical needs. Just recently, back in August when we went on our Yakima trip, I stopped off at the North American Bigfoot Center that's owned by Cliff Barackman, a fantastic museum. And I got to thinking, a little bit of an epiphany came over me. What if Salem had the first ever North American Pterosaur museum? I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that one, but just imagine for a moment. There is a vacant building at 610 Capitol Street, not far from me, my downtown office. Imagine the concept. What could take place there? I can imagine a couple of vehicles, maybe like the Resvani Vengeance, something like that. I know it's a dream. It's only a dream for now, but it's a good idea. I'd like to see if maybe I could explore that. But I can imagine the flack that would come about, just like kind of Ken Ham and his Ark encounter in Kentucky. He's received a lot of flack for that one. This could receive the same thing. But hey, I can dream, can't I? Anyway, let's move forward, shall we? The Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot, is no doubt the most popular cryptid in all of cryptozoology. When people hear of this field, they often think, Bigfoot. The large numbers of researchers is astonishing. Compared to any other researcher investigating an unknown animal, it is mind-boggling just how many field investigators there are devoted to this one creature. Anything else pales in comparison. Others might be, a handful devoted to one particular creature, maybe like the thylacine. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Sasquatch trackers in the world today. With that being said, where do we start? Who should I speak with? Simple, really. Let's avoid what we already know and rediscover what may have eluded us. There may be no better place to start than my own backyard, Oregon. Joining me today is the founder and president of the American Primate Conservancy, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the recognition and protection of Bigfoot. Retired combat veteran, U.S. Army, 20-plus years. Iraq War veteran. Holds a degree in multidisciplinary studies, Grantham University. Host of annual research retreat BeachFoot. I want to know about that. 17th anniversary coming up this year. This is Todd Neiss on the Ropen Network. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. And I got to tell you, I know I've said you're an Oregonian, but you're soon to be living in Arkansas. So how do you say that? Is it Arkansonian, Arkansonian? What is the proper term there?
I'm still working on that, Jacob. I mean, it's a whole different world, to be honest with you, but thank God I married an interpreter, so I'll get it figured out eventually.
Well, that's very helpful, yes. And how long did you live in Oregon for?
I've lived in Oregon all my life, actually, with a few exceptions. You mentioned Iraq. I spent about a little over a year there. I did live in Washington State for a little bit, but Pacific Northwest has really been my home since day one.
I have an initial encounter on April 3rd, 1993, and I'm guessing that this is a part of this, 25 seconds that changed your life forever. Tell me about that, Todd.
Well, yeah, growing up here in the Pacific Northwest, you really don't have a whole lot of choice in hearing the legend, urban legend, if you will, of the Bigfoot. But even so, being an avid hunter, fisherman, hiker, someone at Mount Hood and different things, I'm outdoors quite a bit, and I just really couldn't sign on to that. You might say I was kind of agnostic, if you will. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I really never got invested in terms of reading books on the subject or or watching TV shows for that matter. But my baptism into Bigfooting came rather abruptly. As you said, on April 3rd of 1993, I was a combat engineer, sergeant in the Oregon Army National Guard's 1249th Engineer Brigade. And on this particular day, we were training in high explosives. So for your listeners that aren't aware, what combat engineers do, by and large, does involve the use of explosives, whether it be blowing up a bridge, cratering a road, blowing up a lane through a minefield or what have you. Explosives are pretty handy tools for that kind of stuff. And so it was on that day that we had permission to use some private timberland owned by Cavenham Forest Products at the time. And this is about, to give your listeners perspective, I'd say, just figure about 10 miles east of Seaside, Oregon, if you will, between Seaside and Saddle Mountain State Park.
Ooh.
Short version is this. We had gone in to hit 3 different sites. Again, 3 different scenarios. We had done the first one, cutting charges. Second one was a minefield breach. And the third and final one was actually a cratering charge. And this is where we were using this ammonium nitrate that we'd been soaking in diesel fuel for several hours. But we're talking, small scale earthquake and mushroom clouds, 2,000 feet up in the air. And I mean, some really big booms. And so we had lit the fuses on this third and final charge and got in our vehicles. Obviously, the SOP is to get the heck out of there. I think we had like 11-minute fuse. And so we boarded the vehicles. I had 5 in total, 2 Humvees up front, of which I was a passenger in the second Humvee. So I'm sitting directly behind the driver. It's a beautiful day, especially for April in the Coast Range, as you know. So I had the window down. And again, being an avid hunter, it was just natural for me to look about the countryside, trying to spot some wildlife. And we came around a corner, a slow sweeping right-handed turn, and I got a little more than I bargained for. As we rounded this corner, the tree line kind of cleared away, and I had a direct view of the second blast site, the one that we had detonated at perhaps an hour earlier. And as it came into view, I saw these 3 odd figures standing right out in the open, literally in the gravel pit itself. So, my first thought was, what the heck are those people doing there? I mean, we've got a bomb about to go off, and technically they could have been in range of getting rained on by shrapnel. So, and we really practice, as you can imagine, safety number one, and so everybody's got to be accounted for, and we don't send people off onesie twosie like that. So, but I mean, I hardly even finished the thought, what are those people doing there, when I realized that these weren't people at all. And by that, I mean, these things are jet black, no clothing apparent, and I would have been able to make that out. Huge, built like bodybuilders, all 3 of them. And they were watching us. They were definitely facing us. The 3 of them stood in a row, if you would, facing our direction. The tallest of the 3 standing in the middle, I estimated at close to 9 feet in height. The 2 on either side, easily 7 foot, coming up to the shoulders of the larger one. But it was a profile really that caught me. These arms, ridiculously long. Okay, all the way down to the knees, and I don't believe they were stooped over at all. So I mean, they just
standing straight up,
extremely long arms. Correct. the legs were disproportionate to the torso of a human as well. Very long legs, but we're talking broad shoulders, barreled chest, a discernible taper in the waist down to the legs and whatnot. And I'm just like, I'm not seeing this. There's this process of denial that you got to shake, and it really didn't take that long, because it was the activity they were engaged in too that made it quite clear I wasn't looking at people. Just as a follow-up, though, and I think it's important to note, is that when we did get down to the staging area, which wasn't too farther from that view, I just instinctively, when I got there, I ran out, jogged back up in the direction we had just come from, because I wanted to see him again so badly. And again, with that SOP of having everybody accountable for, which meant everybody had to be within eyesight of each other, I only went as far as I dared. And unfortunately, it wasn't quite far enough to see over this little hill. But it was while I was standing there with, my hand up to my forehead on my tiptoes, trying in vain to get another glimpse, that somebody called out my name. I heard somebody to my right go, "Hey, Neiss." And I look over, and here comes Sergeant Martin. Jeff was one of the soldiers I was working with that day. He's walking up to me. As he's walking over, he says, "What are you looking at?" And I just said, "Nothing, nothing." Then he just continued up to where I was at. I remember he was smoking on a cigarette, and he gets right up to me, looks me right in the eye, and he says, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second blast site." And again, being the brave guy, I said, "I don't know, Jeff. What did you see?" I want to make sure. I'm not sure we're not talking about, Bigfoot, deer, whatever. But I said, "I don't know, Jeff. What did you see?" And he took a drag off a cigarette and looked left and right, made sure nobody was in earshot, and looked right back at me and said, "I saw 3 huge, hair covered." He said, "Bigfoot, I guess." And that, of course, at that, I'm like, "Dude, I'm right there. I saw it too."
I feel like they were watching, almost probably wonder what you're doing to their forest, or in some way. But more, it seemed like there was maybe a sense of intimidation, but you think with the Sasquatch, they tend to do more than just watch if they want to intimidate you. But it looked like they were curious as to what's going on.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because, think about this. Imagine setting off 200, 300 pounds of explosives. The ground shakes, everything's flying, smoke's going everywhere. You would think any species of animal, any species, including man, had they been in that area and witnessed that, would be going in the opposite direction. Right? So, you make a good point. I believe that they were curious enough, that their curiosity was strong enough to overwhelm, overpower any fear.
Yeah.
Which to me says intelligence.
Agree.
The need to know. That's what curiosity is. It's the need to find out, the need to understand, the need to know.
Growing up in a military family, from cousins, relatives, friends, I get a bit of an understanding, which means you probably knew my brother-in-law at that time, Bill Evans, possibly.
Oh, yeah, I know Bill. Billy Evans, you bet.
I wonder, I reached out to him years ago. I'm like, "Do you know a Todd Neiss?" He's like, "Yeah." And I wonder if you've told him your story and what he thought of that. Because I don't know if my own brother-in-law is a believer like we are. But, when it comes from a person who has served, who has no reason to make something like this up, and there's others who have seen it too, it says something. It really does.
Well, the fact of the matter is, most people have more to lose than to gain. And this is why we estimate perhaps only 1 out of 10 people ever do come forward. And I can tell you, too, just by the scores of interviews I've done with other eyewitnesses, that it never ceases to amaze me when I ask them, when did this happen? And, they're 30, 40 years old. They're like, well, I was 12, was fishing with my dad, and who have you told about it? Well, you. Mm-hmm. People sit on this stuff. It eats them alive. They'll always wonder, what happened, what may have happened if they had pursued it or whatnot. But it's kind of a blessing and a curse. But when they do get introduced to somebody who has shared that traumatic experience, they tend to open up, and it's really kind of therapeutic. I've always said it's cathartic to talk about it, to get it off your chest. Well, I live up here. I live up in Welch's, just east of Portland in the Cascade Mountains. I'm actually in the Mount Hood National Forest, and not surprisingly, we get a number of sightings. I just heard one this last week, crossing on Welch's Road. So yeah, I very suspect, and have been for some time, that these watersheds, such as what we have up here, just literally 10 miles as a crow flies from me, these watersheds, the Bull Run watershed that serves Portland's drinking water, is completely off limits to civilians, completely, and always has been. There's a handful of people that are allowed access, those that work on the dams, and really just the federal rangers that patrol it to keep people out. I mean, it's got to be like a wildlife preserve in there. Yeah. And so it's, every so often, I'm sure they venture out of there, mm-hmm. and that's when they get spotted. But yeah, a lot of sightings up here, and frankly, the Coast Range, obviously, where I had my sighting, the Cascade Range, and quite a bit of activity in the Blue Mountains as well in Eastern Oregon.
Yeah, Todd, for you, it's not a matter of believing anymore. It's a matter of knowing. You now know. You know these things are out there. Has that, well, let me ask you this. On this show, we try to put a biblical perspective on everything. Okay. So for me, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian believer, but this doesn't deter anything about what I believe, because I know these creatures are real. I know they're out there, and I know they've been here for a very long time. So people will say, well, how do they fit in Scripture? Well, I think they do in a way, but we'll get to that later. But has that changed you? Has it swayed you from your faith if you are a Christian, or has it just kept you on solid ground?
Oh, yes. I am a Christian, have been for most of my life. And this was a game changer for me in many ways, but certainly not in my faith. And the more that I research, the easier it is to understand that there's a lot of mysteries out there that God's put before us. Yep. And I think it's for a reason. I think it's to, kind of a gut check as far as, we think we know everything that's out there, and all of a sudden he's like, check this out.
Lift the veil.
And yeah, it does test your faith to a degree, I think, because we just assume everything we know is what we're taught to know, and what we're not supposed to know,
right,
apparently doesn't exist. And then when you find out it does, I have to tell you, I set off to seek Bigfoot, and in the process, I found myself, and in so many different ways, it has changed my life. It's given me confidence. It's given me a much more open mind. It's given me an opportunity to develop all kinds of personal strengths and really find myself.
Good.
And I'm very grateful for that.
Excellent. I love hearing that. I mean, you never know who you're going to touch with what you're doing with your research.
I had been corresponding with these Omaha natives for some time. They'd sent me photographs, videos of some encounters that they'd had, and most of it revolved around this eye shine phenomenon. And I've always kind of put in that paranormal, supernatural basket, if you will. I just my first go-to when somebody says, "Oh, these things can cloak, or their eyes can glow, or they can, shoot fire out of their butt," it's like I gotta, my first go-to is show me one other animal, one other species that has this capability, or you're making it up, and you just can't do that. You can't just say, well, they walk through a portal, or they can change their vibrational frequency, or what have you. I got to know. Show me another species that has these characteristics, and then we can talk. But I saw enough over the years that I finally said fine, and I got on the next plane and I flew to Omaha City and eventually on to the reservation north of there. And, if you'd asked me pick 5 states that don't have Bigfoot, I think Nebraska would be right up there. I mean, I'll not having spent a lot of time there, but to me, it's nothing but flat plains and corn, right? Soybeans. But I would come to find out that on the eastern border of the state, where it borders with Iowa, is the Missouri River.
Yep.
And along the Missouri River, which flows right through the reservation, there are some very rugged, rolling hills, hardwood trees, very thick, dense canopy, where they were claiming to have these experiences. So I said, all right. So I came out there, got to meet them for a few days, and then we finally went out in the field on a Monday night. Drove my rental car on this tiny little nondescript 2-lane road, literally 1 lane each way, guardrails, no place to pull off except this one little spot where there was a break in the rail. I think there was an old abandoned logging road there. We backed into there, and he said, let's turn off all the lights, which we did, and even have our cell phone lights on or nothing. And we carefully walked across this road to the other side, and I'm facing darkness. I mean, I can't even see the hand in front of my face, that dark. And my friend, this native buddy of mine, cups his hands to his mouth and yells out into the darkness, "Aho! Kogi!" It's like a Vegas show, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it is quiet. And then he does it one more time, and about, 20, 30 seconds go by, and all of a sudden, from out of the darkness, I see click, lights.
Yeah.
2 lights. Like eyes. And I'm like, is that what I think it is? And he goes, yeah, that's one of them, and shortly after that, it wasn't just this eye shine effect, because there were times we would have 2 and even 3 individuals at a time moving independent of each other, left to the right, sometimes coming forward, sometimes backing off. I mean, it wasn't like somebody put a bunch of LEDs out there and was remote control turning them off and on. These were living beings. How they do it was something I would have to get back to, and I have, and I believe I understand the science behind it.
Okay.
But I was going to say, right, maybe 15 minutes into this first encounter, I hear this female sound off. I assume it was a female because it was just a really high-pitched voice. Belt out this, for lack of a better word, the song. Never heard anything like it. It was like 5 or 6 seconds long, and in that very loud volume, it changed in notes, it changed in pitch, it changed in tempo. After about 5 or 6 seconds, it stopped, and then 10 seconds would go by, and she did it again. And she did it again, 5 or 6 seconds, exactly repeat, same tune. as she did before. And within the course of a minute, she did this 4 times. And I'm just going to stick with she because it just really sounded like it. And it wasn't scary at all. I mean, it was really rather beautiful.
Yeah.
And it sounded very welcoming. And like I said, these 2 native companions of mine had been established a relationship for close to 3 years with them. And this is, all of a sudden I'm just like, okay, I got to take this out of the paranormal bucket now because I'm seeing it. But I'm going to tell you, and there were other kinds of vocalizations. So again, it wasn't just the eye shine. We had some all kinds of grunts and whoops and screams and yells. But that one with the melody was just incredible. And
Wow.
and 3 days later, I went out in broad daylight. I didn't tell my native friends I was going out there because after 3 nights, I wanted to see what it really looked like in the daylight and kind of do a little investigation on my own. And I'll be damned if she didn't sound off broad daylight while I was standing where I suspected that they were standing. She did it again, only once this time, but it was the same darn tune she had done 3 nights earlier. So it was just all in all, it was an amazing experience. Every night we went out, usually from midnight till 2:30 in the morning. We went out, and this during COVID, by the way. So I mean, there was the rest of the reservation was locked down. We just had special permission to be off the res. And anyway,
Wow.
5 nights in a row and in 2 different locations, we had activity, and it's just fantastic.
Remember me. I became stronger. I became tougher. I became better. Some things about war evolved and changed with the times, but remember that it was always me, the warrior. As technology advanced, I used night vision goggles and global positioning systems and drones and lasers and thermal optics, but it was still me, the warrior, that did the work. But also remember, I was not just a soldier, sailor, airman, or marine. I was a son, a brother, a father, a daughter, a sister, a mother. I was a person like you. I, the soldier, sailor, airman, marine. I, the American fighting man. I stood my ground and sacrificed my life, my future, my hopes, my dreams. I sacrificed them all for you. Don't waste it. Live a life that honors the sacrifice of our fallen heroes, so you can truly appreciate the incredible treasures you have. Never forget where it all came from. It came from sacrifice, the supreme sacrifice. Remember them. Always.
The Ropen Network acknowledges the brave men and women who served or are still serving in the U.S. military. 511 Tactical. Always be ready. RN Ropen Radio Network, broadcasting from the heart of Oregon, Salem's capital. Hope everyone's doing well out there. We have Todd Neiss, researcher, author, teacher, founder of the American Primate Conservancy, October 1st, 2015, nonprofit organization based on science and education. Mission statement: the discovery, research, data recognition, and protection of the species known as Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Proud to have him on the show today, and I hope to have him in person in the coming months as he makes his trek to Arkansas, and we wish him all the very best when he establishes a new home out there. Todd, we've got a lot of information here, and some of it is so fascinating. I have to admit, being swept up in the Pterosaur phenomena, the Sasquatch stuff has really eluded me. I'm not as familiar with it as so many are, such as yourself and the others who have come before us. So it's important that we talk about this creature, because I think there's some things here that are not being covered. And from different point of views and different thoughts on what it really could be, it's research that is worth noting. It's good stuff. It really is. The affiliations here, I see the Olympic Project, the Project Zoo Book, Share, Sasquatch Hunters Academic Research Exchange, East Coast Bigfoot Research Organization, and BeachFoot. Now, I do follow you on social network, and I've seen the BeachFoot stuff, and I think you've got that coming up, don't you?
We do. In fact, this will be our 17th year of gathering researchers together.
You probably have speakers come from everywhere.
We do. We've literally had speakers come in from as far away as Australia, England, Russia, New Zealand, and all across the U.S. and Canada. And they come in on their own dime. It's a very unique gathering. It's unlike any quote unquote conference, if you will, many of which I speak at around the country. In 2008, I put together the first BeachFoot. I know the name sounds corny, and it's actually found out later that kind of scared off a few researchers just because of the name. Dr. John Bindernagel. I invited him every year, and I knew him well. I met him in British Columbia, shared the stage with him, in fact, back in the mid-'90s. But he said, I didn't think it was serious. He said, this name just didn't, register. But I came up with the name, Josh. It was Jacob, rather, because I had my sighting in the coast, and I decided this was the setting that I wanted to do, and it is in the Coast Range. And so I just kind of came up with this cornball named BeachFoot instead of Bigfoot, and it stuck. And so I just went with it. But what it is it's a very exclusive gathering of only researchers. Again, not open to the public. I max it out at 100 invitations, and I don't have any problem filling that. It's a 4-day, 3-night gathering in a very casual, private campground in the Coast Range. So we're deep in the mountains there, and the best part is no cell phone range. So everybody's got to actually talk to each other. Yeah. And people forget about it after a day or two, and they actually talk like real people used to, right?
I'd like to hear about your new projects that you're currently working on that could help strengthen this research even further.
There's always a little bit of truth in everything, right? So after that experience on the reservation, I decided to kind of break away from both camps, if you will, and stand on that third rail between the scientific biological group and the paranormal supernatural group, and see if there was some way that we can bridge that gap between these two groups. And lo and behold, in my research, I discovered that polar bears aren't white. And I'm like, what do you mean they're not white? Of course they're white.
This is important, folks.
Seen pictures of polar bears. polar bears are white. And the truth of the matter is a polar bear's fur is not technically white. It doesn't fall in that color spectrum. What they have that makes them appear white is beyond their tannish base coat of fur are guard hairs that extend beyond that base coat. These guard hairs are made up of absolutely crystal clear hairs. That is to say, there is no medulla per se. It's a shaft of clear, almost like fishing line or fiber optic wire, if you will. And like fiber optic wire, it transmits light. That's how we use it in communications, just, light waves and what have you. And so what it does is these guard hairs actually absorb the ambient light and color surrounding the creature, the bear in this case, and distribute that color across the entire body, thereby creating really the ultimate camouflage, if you will, especially be it on ice or in snow. It allows them to get up on animals because of this phenomena. And so in this particular case, I decided to do an experiment. I'm actually in the process of it still because I've been struggling to find all the materials I need. But I've acquired a full North American black bear pelt.
Yeah.
I've also purchased 1,000 feet of fiber optic wire, which again, it kind of looks like, if you will, say 50, 60 pound test fishing line, if you will. And what I plan to do is draw a line down the back of this pelt and insert from the back, lengths of this fiber optic wire through the fur to extend it beyond, say, a half inch or so beyond the base coat. And in doing so, once I get that done, my plan is to take it out into the forest, into certain natural settings and different lighting, different backgrounds, and just see if my theory's correct, half of that pelt is going to blend in.
Yeah.
And the other half will look black like a bear normally would in nature. So, again, this is my way of trying to say, I know you experienced something, but let's see if we can't explain it, because now we have an example in nature that we can go back to, we can fall back on. And so that is something I plan to continue once I get over into my new home in Arkansas. And it's going to be interesting. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I even got a raccoon pelt. Initially, I was going to try it on a small scale, but then I got my hands on the big guy. So I've got my Ursus americanus pelt, and so I'll let your folks know how that turns out.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like very, very exciting to hear about that. You're right. When I look at just recently I went on a hunt and I saw all the furs, black bears. They're really not black. They're more like a brown. One gentleman came into the store. He was very upset and irate that they had lost his bear skin. They're like, no, this is it right here. It's like, that's not black. Well, black bears aren't black. They're brown. When you get them close and you work on them. Any taxidermist would probably know this too. I'm
actually working with the director of Monster Quest right now on a documentary. It's going to be called Sasquatch Legends Meets Science 2.
Nice.
Follow up to the original. I actually drove out to Minnesota and met Doug Hychek, who's the mastermind behind the Monster Quest series. He actually built me a custom e-bike for research, stone quiet electric bike that's just designed for Bigfoot research. There's not another bike in the world like it. It wasn't cheap, but it's the only one of its kind. But so I've worked with the Monster Quest crew. Obviously, Monster Quest isn't back on. I've done Unsolved Mysteries. A couple of years ago, they flew me to Hollywood to do a show with William Shatner called The Unexplained.
Yes, that's a great show.
We just came out with a series called A Flash of Beauty, and I'd like to, put a shout out to Brett and Jill, the producer and director, with Resonance Motion Pictures. Flash of Beauty series started with The Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, and I was able to play a part in that. And it ultimately shot to the #1 most downloaded new documentary on Amazon Prime. Since then, they've followed up with a sequel called A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot.
I saw that.
And it's one step behind the new Taylor Swift documentary that just came out. So that's really saying something.
Todd, it has been a blessing to have you on the show. I love your research, and I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
It's too bad you're moving, but I get it why you are. And I think that you're going to be in for a great adventure in Arkansas. And I do wish the very best for you. And that when the next time you come down to Oregon, look me up. I'd love to have lunch with you, have some deeper conversations without the cameras.
No, I'd love that. And just for the record, I am retaining my home here in Oregon as well. So I'll be floating back and forth. So
Chateau de Squatch in
Oregon. We'll
Oregon.
bump into each other.
Good, good. That's great.
Not to be confused with the new Casa de Squatch in Arkansas.
Exciting, very exciting. Like I said, I'm glad to have had you on the show. Love your research. Stay in touch. Anytime you want to reach out, that's what I'm here for. But keep me informed with all the new things you're doing. Thank you so much for being here.
Will do. Thank you, sir. It's been enough.
Bye-bye for now.
Take care.
Folks, thank you so much for watching the Ropen Network on CC Media, YouTube, and Rumble. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to listen to the full, non-condensed audio alternative, head over to our Spotify for Podcasters account, which you can find in the link directly below. In the meantime, seek the truth, and we will see you next time on the RRN.